The sponsor of our Leadership Legacy Series is Bricker and Eckler, represented today by Price Finley and his colleagues. Today's forum is sponsored by the Huntington, represented by Central Ohio President Jim Grote. And our partner is Conway Center for Family Business, represented today by Deanna Gordon and her associates. Please thank them for their support. The complete biography for each speaker is in today's forum program, so this will be a brief introduction. Starting his own pizza shop in the south side of Columbus almost 50 years ago, his chain of stores has grown to 200 locations in 6 states and has added multiple businesses under the Grote Company umbrella. Please welcome the founder of Donato's, Jim Grote. Our next speaker began helping in her family's pizza shop when she was about 11 years old. She has utilized her human resources background to lead the family's company following its buyback from McDonald's. Please welcome the chairman of the board and owner of Donato's, Jane Grote Abell. Moderating today's forum is the host of The Spectrum and co-anchor on NBC4 and a senior attorney at Porter Wright Morris and Arthur. Please welcome Colleen Marshall. On behalf of our sponsors, Bricker and Eckler and the Huntington, welcome to all our panelists, and Colleen, it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Rich. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you are as excited as I am about being able to pick the brains of these two very successful Central Ohioans. And I've got to start with you, Jim, and I've got to start at the beginning. Can you figure out, is your mic on?
You said how smart we are.
But I know that you were a South Side boy, so tell us how all of this started. What led to the founding of what is now an empire?
Wow, it is on. That's good. Well, that was a big thing getting this mic hooked up. I learned something again. We didn't have these in the South End when we were growing up. No, all kidding aside, I started making pizzas when I was 13, and that was my first job besides the paper route, and I was really excited because you get to be paid by the hour rather than delivering papers and then collecting the money and then paying your bill, and then what's left over is yours. It was a good experience, but it was hard to make a profit out of it and so on. But so I finally I had a job slicing pepperoni in my first pizza place. They needed some help, and the pizza business was just starting to take off. So I spent hours slicing pepperoni with a paring knife and shredding cheese. Eventually, I was promoted because I was still the only employee, and then I was able to make pizzas, and then moving right up the line, I was able to bake them, and then the owners wanted to take a day off, and they told me I should manage the place. I was only 15, so I managed 2 nights a week. So I got a really great start on a business that I knew nothing about when I started, and I started to really get excited about it. I was still going to school and so on. So they offered, and this is really where the motivation and the excitement came from, but they offered to sell me the place because they were going their separate ways, and they said, well, you know, Red, that's what they called me when it was Red. I said, would you, you know, we're going to sell the place, and we're going to offer it to you first because you've been here since you were 13. I said, right. And I said, I'm really excited about that. So I got my dad over there, you know, and it was $11,000 is what they wanted, but no payments down, and you pay it off over 5 years. And, you know, I could do my adding and subtracting. And I said, you know, I think I can handle that. So Dad came over, and, you know, and my brother, because they both had to work the nights I was playing football and other activities. But I told him I'd work the weekends, and they could work the weeknights. And Dad said, Jim, this pizza business is just a fad. This is not going to work. He said, you got to go to finish high school, go to college, and so on. So, but that's when the fire started burning, and I was able to find a store for sale. It was Donato's, in fact. My buddies were working there, and I was going up to Ohio State. I was a sophomore then, and I was working part-time still, almost 6 years by now, and going to school. But I really wanted to be in the pizza business, and so this Donato's came available because it had to be moved, and there was no place to move it, and all the guys that worked for him, wanted to get a hold of it. But where I was working part-time as a plumber's helper on the summertime, there was a storeroom there, and I just happened to be dating Jane's mother, and she did not want to. Her dad put the storeroom there so she could open a beauty shop. She didn't want to do that, so I was able to borrow half from. Turned out to be your grandpa. He wasn't her grandpa then because she wasn't around yet, but it was Herman Bauman, Herman the German, and but we were renting from him, and he wanted to get that storeroom occupied. So I borrowed half from him and half from my dad. I had no money, and that came up with $1,300. And the Don Potts was the owner of the Donato's. He only opened 3 days a week, and he said the first person to come up with $1,000 and can move it gets it. And so I found the $1,000, and I was able to move it, and we started. It'll be 50 years ago this next June. People were waiting in line to get in, and it was busy from the very first day we opened, and it's been busy ever since.
You know, that was really great business advice from your dad, that the fad of pizza will never take off.
Yeah, I reminded him of that a number of times as time went on.
Well, the price came way down in that time.
That's true.
11,000 to 1,300.
Well, Jane, you grew up in the pizza business. I mean, he was clearly in this business before you were born. So did you ever imagine being in anything but the pizza business?
I'm looking at my brother who's here, my older brother.
So, by the way,
Oh, she has to point out he's older, Tom.
Yeah.
He's taller and older.
Jane, he's the fact checker.
He is.
He checks the facts.
Well, I would say growing up in the family business, we grew up on the south side, excuse my voice, but on Thurman Avenue, and it's a very residential area if you've ever been to. It's our first location on Thurman Avenue. So our house was literally right behind there. It's no longer there. They tore it down. It's a parking lot now. I'm not resentful, but it's gone. So, which was good for customers. But we used to live right behind that. So every morning, literally, we would wake up and it was pizza. So holidays and birthdays and everything was about the restaurant. And I think one of my favorite memories was as we grew up, and I literally thought everybody grew up this way. Dad, for whatever reason, when he visualized his first building, he did not build a dining room. It still does not have a dining room to this day. So when guests came in to get their pizza, don't know why he didn't have them ready for him, but he would always send them back to our house. So go back and see Nancy and the kids. And literally every night our living room would be full of our guests. And which I appreciate so much about that, the hospitality, thinking about that. If every night you had literally your living room full of your guests, which we loved, I thought we loved, and we, of course, were entertaining. But we became friends with our customers, and they were no longer just customers, they were part of our family. And so for me growing up, and there's 4 of us in the family, I don't know why, I just always have had this passion, and Dad very much said, go search and see, make sure what you want to do. You don't necessarily have a job here, but if you want one, you have to work for it. And we all worked in the business. So my brother was my mentor for many, many years, and he was our COO running the business for a long time. But I always love our business, and I think what I love most about our business is the people. So I love our product, and I love what we do, and I love what we stand for, but I love our people in the business. So I would say I'm probably the one out of the 4 kids. I never visualized much doing anything else other than pizza.
Do you still like to eat pizza? I mean, seriously. After all these years, all those times, you have to have pizza when you were growing up. It had to be what you grabbed, you're working. Do you still crave pizza like the rest of us?
Absolutely, every day. I love it.
I noticed you ate the fruit plate.
I did eat the fruit plate because when I'm not eating pizza, I'm trying to eat a little fruit.
Yeah,
Do you?
I when I was involved every day, I tested pizza every day at lunchtime, and we call that testing. So, I mean, you know, so and we would try all these different items and so on, and to this day, the only thing is, I think I've eaten so much pizza that I might have a little gluten intolerance.
Are you sure you want to tell
But
people?
I'm not sure about that. But well, they said to be candid. I mean,
Okay.
but so we are really trying. We're looking for a gluten-free pizza that might come out pretty soon. In fact.
Oh, you would sell a lot of that. There are a lot of people
Yeah.
who would buy that.
But
You
I
know,
do cheat. I still cheat a little. And
You did start on the south side, a small shop with your house right behind you. How do you take that small shop and say, okay, now I'm going to open a second shop? I mean, when did that come along? When did you decide that, and did you envision all along that this could be this nationwide empire?
you know, I think about that, and we were so busy when we started. You know, it was just the hardest challenge I had was just keeping up with the business. And I said, well, golly, this is great. I think we could be all over the country, you know. And so that's just, you know, a 20-year-old thinking that this will work anywhere, you know. So and I had two people working with me, and they said, oh, this is busy. I want to open up one in Whitehall and open one up in Grove City. So they went off and did that, and they, you know, had the recipe and so on, and we were partners in it. And it was all right until the one fellow in Whitehall called and said he couldn't go in. He said he found a girlfriend, and she wants him to wants to go out with him on Friday nights, and so he let one of the guys run it on the weekends. And then they called me one weekend and said, we're out of cheese. And I said, that's not good, because you're making pizza. And and he said, well, don't worry about it. We put Parmesan on it. And, and I said, oh no, we got to talk. And Grove City was very similar. It was really just it was still an art to make the way we make our pizzas, and it was who was making it, and how it looked coming out of the oven and so on. And it wasn't a system yet. And so I closed those two stores, and that was probably the smartest thing that I could have done, because it forced us to bring a system about. And that was a little bit of the reason why I was working on this pepperoni machine, you know, because that was my big bottleneck on Friday nights, was putting pepperoni on pizza. So I come up with an idea for a machine that would put it on in just 7 seconds as opposed to a minute. And I thought I was going to sell them to every little pizza retail store, and they were too big and they didn't buy them. But the frozen pizza business did, and they had all these people working in their processing places with no machine, and they told me that we'll buy as many as you can make. And so that was the outlet for the pepperoni machine, but it was because I was looking for a system to make the pizzas the same way every time. And we really do feel that way today, that once someone gets a pizza, they should get that same pizza that they bought the first time, because we owe them that. It's like we always talk about an unwritten contract, and this puts a lot of attorneys out of the picture, Chuck. But Chuck Kegler's back there. But it was an unwritten contract, because they got a good pizza one time, they should get it every time. And so we developed a system from what I learned from closing the two stores.
Well, I found out at lunch you each have a different philosophy on the whole test process when you have a new idea for a new pizza. And tell them what your idea is for the test process.
Well, I think at one of those lunches, we'd all sit around there and try different combinations, and we'd say, how do you like this? And they said, oh, this is really good. And another person would say that, and another person, and then I said, I love it. And they said, well, let's put it in the stores. So that was our test process.
Took one lunch, and what's your test process?
Well, what we do, it can take anywhere from 3 to 18 months. And so we come up with a lot of different ideas. We have 3 chefs on board. And so they come up with different tastes and profiles of the ingredients. And we put it out on the internet, and we get feedback from consumers that kind of narrow it down. And they rate it on probability of obviously buying it and the quality of it. And so from that, then we bring consumers into our test kitchen, and they all sit around the table, and they rate it. And obviously, definitely will. We like the definitely will buy the product. And so from there, then we put it into our test stores. He does not like this process. And there, we put it into the stores, into our test stores. So we have 3 to 6 test stores where we actually get consumer feedback. And so some of them made it all the way through the process, and then in the stores, the consumers actually didn't buy it, so we didn't end up having it as a marketing campaign. But both processes work.
She is clearly the diplomat of the family. Both processes work, but yours is just a little better. Is that?
It might just take a little longer.
You said that there was, well, I asked if she had any that she thought were just going to sell like gangbusters and then didn't work. And you did. You had a favorite that didn't make it.
Yeah, when we opened up our mill run, we did a lot of work on the concept after we bought the company back. And we kind of came out on our mill run location, and we decided we needed a little bit more menu breadth and different types of pizzas. So one of the pizzas that was on there was our Caesar salad ciabatta bread pizza, and it was on this great ciabatta crust, and it was a chicken Caesar salad on top of it. My favorite. It was absolutely to die for, but the consumers just didn't buy it. And so we unfortunately had to take it off. But so we've gone through these processes before where there's really good products that we do all love, but a consumer sometimes is kind of like, well, that's not a pizza. That's not what I was looking for. I want a pizza. So
And have you had any that you thought were just going to sell and people just didn't pick up on it?
No, everyone I picked sold.
Well, I have to ask you. I'll ask you both. What's your favorite pizza? I mean, if you're going to go in and you think, oh, I'm starving, I'm going to get a pizza. Which one do you get?
mine's a large pepperoni. Literally a large, too, because I can eat a large pepperoni.
She can eat large. Well, this might come as a surprise. Mine's the founder's favorite.
You know, we of course see you now in this great successful company. Obviously you're doing really well, but there had to be some roadblocks along the way. There had to be some challenges that, you know, when you have a business that grows that quickly and that far, that you've come up against some roadblocks. I mean, and what do you think have been those biggest challenges for each of you?
Well, in the beginning, I was talking about a system. So, you know, I said I would never open another pizza place until we had a system, and we developed a system. And then we were able to open, I think we had 17 of them here in Columbus, and we needed to go on television. I mean, we decided we're going to go on television. So, yeah. I thought
that's a really good plan.
See, I know who I'm talking to here. But yeah, television was good. But no, it really was. But what happened, the agency, which was Jack Conte Agency, way back in the beginning, and it's a little jingle they came up with that said, "Don't you let them do you like they do." That was one of our first advertisements, which people were really singing that. I'm not sure why, but they were singing that a lot. But before we even opened another store, you know, they said, you got to really get your act together. And we, you know, they said, you know, you got a different uniform here, there, and at each store. So we then decided we better look alike. And that was a big challenge. In 1 year's time, and they said, give it a year. We got together to where we had our policies, our uniforms, and our rules in the store and so on. And we went on television. And it does work. Our business that very next year was up 25%. I mean, and then kept continuing like that. So that was one of the initial challenges.
And how about for you? I imagine when you take over a company from your father, there are roadblocks just with people saying, well, who does she think she is? He's the boss. I mean, did you run into some of that when you took over?
Can you imagine? I would say, well, no, because we grew up in the business. So my brother, my sister, my younger brother sometimes came to work. But we grew up in the business, and it was a constant for us. Dad made us work harder than anybody else. So I think maybe people might have thought that at the beginning. I will say I think our biggest challenge, I don't want to say roadblock, but where we really grew as an organization was when McDonald's acquired us. And we weren't necessarily looking to sell. I always say it wasn't like Dad was saying, I need an exit strategy ever. It was about how do we grow our business the right way. So we were looking at, do you do an IPO or do you do private equity? And what are the different ways a private family company can grow a business around the world? And so McDonald's happened to knock on our door and flew us to Chicago, and my brother was a COO at the time, and I was our chief people officer. And my dad was a CEO, and I'll never forget sitting in the room with Jack Greenberg, and we're like, what do you think they want? You know, and they fly us up there, and Jack said he wanted to buy the whole thing. Well, I'm not a very good poker player. I think I was going to start crying, like right then, like, oh, I want to buy the whole thing. And so my brother's like, yes, this is great, because we're going to And my dad's the best poker player ever, because he's just sitting there. And so we leave, and I'm like, well, we're not going to sell it unless they have the same culture. And because that's so important to a family business, is the culture that you create in a family business. And it can be good and dysfunctional, but that can also be very healthy. So I was really passionate about how do we keep our culture when the world's largest restaurant company wants to buy you. So I had some really great learnings, and my personally were in those roadblocks for me during that time was all of a sudden my paycheck had someone else's name on the bottom, and I was like, that's not my dad's name. And so all of a sudden I started working for the world's largest restaurant company. It was no longer this family business. And I think our first meeting with the CEO, he's sitting in there. We didn't know he was going to be our CEO, or I didn't. And that's my brother, my dad, and I were sitting around the table, and we're talking about the growth and all the due diligence to close and sell to McDonald's. And so he starts, I'm like, well, you got to go work in the stores, and, you have to take a drug test, because that's what we do. And he just kind of looked at me. I think he got a little uncomfortable, and he just looked at us, and he said, well, when I'm CEO, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know who I thought it was. I was like, well, you're not going to be CEO unless you fulfill our mission and promise. And that's what happened. Music came on. Said, hello. I was like, shut your mouth, Jane. So he left the room, and I remember looking at my dad and my brother and like, oh, this is going to be a different game. And so for me, first time in my life, and I always talk to our managers about it, like never work in fear. Don't work in an environment where you're working in fear, because fear paralyzes you, and it makes you paranoid, and it makes you not be able to make decisions and think clearly. So it's really important, don't work in fear. But I had never worked in fear before, because I worked with my family, and I never really knew what that felt like. I got it after that meeting, and a couple more meetings, and so I started getting it. But the best thing for me, so my challenge was I started working in fear, and it was awful, and it was about 9 months of it, and I realized all of a sudden that it was becoming about me and my agenda, and not about what was right for the company. And even though I was trying to stand up for the mission and our culture and our people, there was this really dark place of fear happening. And it wasn't, Paul Adi said the most wonderful thing to me. He's like, well, what were you fearful of? I was like, well, I wasn't afraid of losing my job because I had an employment contract, so I wasn't afraid of losing my job. I wasn't afraid financially because McDonald's bought us. And so it was a really great question. I was afraid that the culture and the spirit of the company was just smoldering, and that I couldn't do anything about it, and I felt helpless. And then I got out of it, and things turned around. But it was a really interesting, challenging time for me.
And that decision when you took the company back over again, when were you feeling some of what she was feeling too, that, hey, this is my baby, and I don't like what you're doing with it? Or what led to the decision to say, this is coming back to my family?
Well, first of all, to sell the whole company was a big deal, because, we said, well, we'll sell, half of it, we'll keep controlling interest, and that wasn't going to work. And so we went back and forth on that. And I looked at their mission and their statement and so on, and they have a great mission statement, and they hire from within. They're really a great company, but it's very different from where we are. And so in the 4 years that we were there, we learned a lot of things, and they took our system, and that was one of the reasons why they looked at us and really searched out 60 other pizza places around the world, and chose us because we had a repeatable system. And so they figured they could take that and duplicate it all over the world. Well, that was pretty exciting to me, and I said, well, geez, this is great. Well, we can sell them the whole thing. We'll make sure that their principles are kept in line, just like ours are. And so that, I thought, was going to happen. 4 years later, their stock went down. They opened, we had something like 200 stores real quick. I mean, in 20 stores in Atlanta in just a year. So they were moving really fast, and you know, this was way faster than we were ever able to train our people. Also, they did a big study. They brought in a focus group that this company, you know, that's what they did. They did focus groups. And so they come in and says, okay, we're going to relook at your whole concept, and we're going to do focus groups in Tampa, Atlanta, North Carolina, all different around the country, and find out what they like about the concept and then how we can change it. And what they came up with is that you guys are doing great on carry out and delivery. We're really going to get we're going to get a part of the $6 billion pizza eat-in business, and we'll add that to your $1 million average unit volume, and you'll be doing $1.8 million with the eat-in and so on. So that was all in theory, and the focus group cost, I remember that, I just got to tell you this, but it cost $1 million to have those people tell us that. And, you know, and I said, God, what, you know, let's open a store with that. But anyway, so or one. But so what happened is they were opening stores. They were $1.8 million in actual cost, which was 1-to-1 on our volumes, and we weren't doing $1.8 million. We were $1 million annual volume per store company, and to grow that much, it's an 80% growth on the come for eat-in business. So that was just a high investment, and we couldn't make any profit that way. So the concept had changed. So that happened in 4 years, and then they asked you to close down Atlanta. And this was heart-wrenching because we never had to do that before. So it was a matter of doing it. You know, if we're going to close something down, we're going to do it right. So you did job fairs and all the different things. So we got really good at how we closed down stores. But the problem is, 4 years later, their stock went from 42 when they bought us down to 13, and everybody in the whole company was getting nervous. And it was the first example of to me of what happens when a company is run ran for the stock prices, the shareholders, in quarterly returns. That decisions are made. Maybe they're not the best ones, but they have to make sure their earnings are right, no matter what. And so, you know, they came to us and told us about the stores that we were going to close down. Also, that you know, we would have to. That their CEO came to. They fired the one that we worked with, Jack Greenberg, and put a new guy in, mainly because their stock went down so fast. It was during that tech bubble around 2000, and 2000 to 2004 when it went down. So we had to be sold by the end of 2003, because the new CEO said there'll be no losses on the balance sheet or the P&L statement for 2004. And Jane, that's where your story picks up on talking me into buying the company back.
Oh, I talked you into it. Well, actually, the rumor hit the street that they were going to close or sell Donato's. And that was February of 2003. So Dad walked into my office, and we had heard the rumor, and I'm like, come on, Dad, let's buy back. And my brother has started another company. My sister is doing art. My younger brother bought a ranch out in Colorado. And I was like, come on, Dad, I'm the last one standing. Let's buy it back. I said, I have all the energy. I just built a house. I'll sell the house, which, by the way, I'm still trying to sell if anybody wants to buy it. I'll sell the house. I'll do whatever I have to. I'll put everything back into the business. But I really need you because you're so smart and you're such a great leader. And you obviously know how to taste all our products and make them successful. So, and I really need your money, too. So that was me talking him into it. He said, okay.
And did you regret it at all, or did you instantly think this is what we need to do?
No, and Jane's argument for it was that in the 4 years that McDonald had the company under their control and leadership, our people didn't leave. There was a lot of turmoil going on in the office and in the boardrooms and so on, but in the stores, the same people were still there that were there when they bought the company. And she said, Dad, all these people are here. If we disperse the company, there's going to be you know, these guys, you know, and gals have been here for 20, 30 years. We have some that have been with us for 45 years from the very first store. She said, those jobs will be gone. We still have the spirit in the stores. Let's buy it back, you know. And so she did tell me she needed my money.
It was a really interesting time, though, because our CFO at the time was trying to put together a plan to close it or change it to McTee's sub sandwich shop and take the Big Don and our sub sandwiches and create the sub sandwich shop and close all the real estate and sell off all the real estate to get McDonald's some money back. And so while he was doing that with some people in the organization, I was putting together a team of experts with Chuck Kegler and Todd Kegler and Jim Weiland and Ted McClellan, who is a real estate person, and my dad, and Tom Kraus, and we met off-site on my vacation days, because McDonald's was still paying for us, to how do we buy this back? And so then we went and presented on October 28th of 2003 our plan. So our CFO presented the plan to kind of close it up and sell it, and we presented the plan to buy it back and let McDonald's help us buy it back, which they did. And we left that room. I'll never forget that, because I did, although I don't even know if you remember saying this, we did all this work, and I presented, here's what the org chart will look like, here's the people, blah, 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 and here's the numbers, here's what we think we can do in the first year, because we were losing millions of dollars when we bought this company back. So then you're like, what the heck were you thinking? But we were losing a lot of money when we bought the company back. And we walked out, Dad goes, are you sure that one number was right? Oh. Yes, I'm sure it's right. I went to the bathroom, I'm like looking at my laptop. But so anyway, McDonald's was a great partner. They were a great partner when we sold. They were a great partner when we bought it back. We bought it back. And I like to tell the story about our people in this sense and how delicate brands are. Because I don't know if you remember the year we sold it back. It was instrumental to us in 1999. But we had customers boycotting us, like, no, you sold out, don't do it. And you know, they were so upset. And you changed the product's different. And then when we didn't change the product during that time, and when we bought it back, we were losing money, and then we had a $10.5 million turnaround. But it was the same people and our same guests, and all of a sudden people were saying, oh, the product's so much better. It's like, we still didn't change anything, but that's how delicate brands are. And I truly believe it's whether or not your people care about what they do, and whether or not they care about not who they work for as much, and not that you're not great to work for, but what we stand for and how they're treated in that one restaurant by that one manager, and how that manager is treated by a supervisor. So, and do we still have fear? Probably in our culture, but it's about understanding it and allowing people an environment to trust to make a mistake and trust to fall down and get back up and try again. So I think that turnaround, honestly, I'd like to say it was something we did, but it was truly our people to start caring about what they were doing again. And I think our customers cared again. So,
Well, it's almost time to open this up for questions, but I want to quickly ask you to summarize what you're doing on the South Side, because you've really made a commitment to a part of town where you started that doesn't have maybe the same image that it had back in 1963, but you're trying to change that around a little bit.
Well, yeah, I was sitting next to Janet. This was the genesis, our trip down through the South Side and then up through to Livingston Avenue and Children's Hospital. And Tom, being on the board, said, Janet, would you meet with Jim and Jane and go take a tour of the South Side? Right before that, the mayor called and said, Jim, didn't you start your pizza place in the South Side? And I said, yeah. Why? He says, because it's really dismal. Things are falling off the ends of the earth down there, and we really need some people to start helping out, finding out what they can do, finding other businessmen that could really help bring it back. And he told me some of the statistics. I couldn't believe 20% of the houses were boarded up. There was maybe a 20% unemployment, 40% dropout rate at high school, all these single mother births. I mean, it was, I was shocked. And we would go down. I mean, we visit the stores and look around our area, talk to all the managers, and we were familiar. I mean, it wasn't like we were never there, but I never saw it in depth all the way to the Reeve Avenue area and below that. I was shocked. And so, when the genesis of Mike Mayor Mike Cullen was, you know, all this is in our backyard. And I just got back from Africa, and we had an experience with Terry Davis from Children's Hospital. He started an orphanage in Africa of AIDS orphans, parents who died of AIDS, and they took care of these kids. 13 years later, these kids came back to help, and we met them, and there was one finishing her law degree, another electrical engineer, another designer, a head nurse. And I said, my gosh, with some education and some care, these kids, these babies that were going to be thrown away, could be, they can be taught, and with some care and values and discipline, they can be productive, smart citizens. And so when Mayor Coleman called me, I said, my God, this is right in our backyard, and something has to be done. If we can get these babies, and this is where we're working with Southside Learning and Development Center first, but also with remodeling homes and so on with Don Kelly and Jim Williams and Bob Yoakum, some old-time businessmen down there. Those guys are my mentors. They call me the kid. They're 82, 83 years old, but they were always my heroes, you know. And but nevertheless, they all got together. We formed a little company called a Renaissance. Don, being in development, immediately, I think he might. There was 47 homes earmarked for the a grant. People would apply. We'd fix up the fronts of their homes, and I think they have maybe 50 or 10, maybe almost finished. So this all came about from that phone call, and we're driving down there with Janet in the deeper south end, and I said, I used to deliver pizzas here, you know, and then we go up to Livingston Avenue and another boarded up house, and I said, I used to deliver pizza there, and it was just kind of shocking. So it's a natural. It's a small step, a little one or two steps at a time, but we really would like. I had that vision of how it was when I was carrying papers down there, and that spark is still there. There's pride in the south end of Columbus, and I think with a little stoke in the fires, we can get that pride. The people are still there for that, and if we can get those flames going, John Edgar is the man on the street down there, and Don Kelly and Mayor Coleman both said John Edgar's the man. So he is fanning the flames down there, and with continued help from the community, we might have a nice end of town again, with South High being a beacon.
And we are now going to ask if you have a question for the Grotes, if you'd come up to the microphone and introduce yourself, and we do have a few minutes left to do that.
Margie Pizzuti with Goodwill. Great job. It was such a wonderful thing to hear your personal story and your personal interactions. You have never forgotten your roots, and it's clear with what you've done on the South Side, but you've also done a lot of other things in the community, both Jane and Jim. And talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing briefly with Community Shelter Board, with Action for Children, even with Goodwill, because I know you have a lot of passion for what you're doing, you and your family.
Well, and do you care if I jump in on that? Well, one of the things that we employ people, and we're very fortunate to be able to have a place of employment where we can hire people and create jobs. And so after talking to Margie and Michelle Heritage Ward from Community Shelter Board, we were just sitting there talking. It's like, if we employ people, and she was talking to me about the homelessness in Columbus, in our backyards, all around us, and it's worse. And we're having a hard time because the shelters are full. So, and because of the recession, and people are just falling on hard times. What can we do? So we were just painting this vision. Well, what if every one of our restaurants agreed to hire homeless, and the work that Margie's done in helping us with the workforce development and with Michelle in qualifying people and putting people back to work again, which I'm really excited about. It's been a really wonderful project. So we now have 3 that are actually going into management with us, and 1 potentially buying a house. And it's just, you know, I'm not going to say this right. It's a hand up, or you're not putting your hand out. You're helping people up, and really, all we're doing is providing employment in a safe place. And Goodwill's been a great partner in that, and making sure that people are getting to work. because obviously vehicle and transportation is very hard. So big passion, and hopefully to be able to continue to do that, which is really great. Action for Children, where's Diane? She's in here. So I've been on the board with Action for Children forever, and just to take it back a little bit further before the Mayor Mike's call and Janet Jackson, we went down to visit Southside Learning Development Center on Grote Avenue. And it's a old building, 1928, I want to say. And these little kids and these bright eyes are in this building, and they provide such great services. So they were doing a campaign to raise money to move these children into a building that they deserve, where they can have not only quality education, but go to the restroom and not have things falling down around them. And so that was kind of where we started, and I brought Tom and my dad, and we did a tour of Southside Learning Development Center. So I'm real excited what's happening with REBIZ. It's going to be a co-located facility, and the city has hired a project person to help us in the community say, what are your needs with Southside Settlement House? Some of those programs got dispersed. So what are the needs in the community, and what can we do at Reeb Elementary School, which is really cool. And so it's going to be a co-located facility of programs, job training, daycare, elementary, and educational care for people who need to go and find a job, get trained on a job, and have quality daycare and childcare at the same time. So we're very excited about that. Obviously, we're involved with Spielman. We've been involved with Palatania. There's lots of different things. I think our biggest passion happens to be children, and what can we do to help children between the ages of 0 to 5 really get the education that they need.
I get the feeling that you have an idea and you go to Tom and your father and say, guess what you're doing now? And I see you nodding a little bit. Yeah, well.
Are you kidding? Do you think they would ever say, oh, okay, Jane?
Yeah. Hi.
Hello, my name's John McKnight, and first off, kudos for everything that you just talked about. That's fantastic. I really like seeing a capitalist business that succeeds that then does so much to give back and take care of things. So I really appreciate all of those efforts. My questions, I've actually got two. Columbus is a great pizza town. I eat a lot of pizza, and a bit of a connoisseur. There's a lot of just little one-off shops. There might be a couple of locations. A lot of them are just one. Are those little guys your competition, or is it just the big ones?
Half of them are related to us.
Are they? And then, so that's question number one. So question number two, separately, what's next for Donato's? So you guys sold to McDonald's, you bought it back. It's now family-owned again. Is there another generation coming in that's going to keep it a family-owned business? Where's it going to go from here? So there's my two questions. Thank you.
Well, to your first one on who our competition is, do you want to answer that?
Well, the mom and pops are always our competition, but since I was a mom and pop, I'm always rooting for them. So, but the big companies that come in give us, they are on the media continually with their $10 pizzas and so on. It makes it really hard to compete without changing our products. So that they are our biggest competition. But the mom and pops are always nipping at our heels and so on, kind of keeping us honest and so on. So that's
as far as where we're going as a company, I always kind of say, like, we were a family business before McDonald's. Truly, and my mom and my brother and sister, everybody kind of worked there, and then we had extended family. I think McDonald's really helped us in a lot of ways, and we became much more, I would say, corporate business during that time. And when we bought it back, it's more of a business that happens to have family in it. My dad and I, and then the rest of the family all have ownership, but so does our CEO and our CFO. They all wrote a check, and they all got back in. And that was another lesson for me. When we sold the business, it was great, great estate planning. Thank you very much. But when we bought it back and I wrote that check and put it back in, it's just different, and it feels different. And everything you put back into is different. So that type of ownership is different. So we did have some of our leadership team do that. As far as, we're not necessarily the generation 1, generation 2, generation 3, unless we have one of your grandchildren who are so excited about it. I think the biggest thing is when you're in a family business, your kids have to really, really want to be in it and want to do it and not feel like they're obligated to do it or doing it because some emotional tie or try to make my dad proud. And so my son actually my brother's an investor in Snap, and my son is an investor in Snap. fitness, and he's an owner-operator of 2 locations, and that's his passion, and that's what he wants to do. The rest of all your grandchildren are probably still too young, so we don't know where that's going to end up, but I think it's much more of how do we sustain the business as a business that happens to have a family spirit in it.
Do we have a final question?
Yes, hi, Andy Campbell, Metropolitan Club. Thank you, Jim and Jane and Colleen, for being here today. A quick question, Jim, and you noticed in the bio that there's some interesting kind of businesses that aren't necessarily pizza, and you touched on that a little bit there. I wonder if you could expand on some of the ventures that you have going on there, kind of outside that, or the entrepreneurial spirit that you're fostering there.
Well, what came out of trying to create a system was the Grote Pep-O-Matic company. And it went beyond the Pep-O-Matic. So it's 40 years old this year, and we started again with the frozen pizza business, and we bought a couple other companies, a potato peeling company. That's exciting. But we're more or less a meat and potato. And we also bought a company over in England that is putting sandwiches together, these fresh sandwiches. So that company's growing. My 2 nephews are buying into that, so it's a continuation of the family. And then finally, the Green Biologic, which Tom and I took on about 5 or 6, maybe longer than that, years ago. We got a patent on that. We had a way of making biobutanol out of, we originally were going to make it out of cheese whey, which is how I got involved. And we weren't able to do that. So, but we had a good system, and Tom found a company and put on some really good talent that we were able to merge with a company in England called Green Biologic, of which he's the CFO. And he's out now trying to find some money to build some plants for biobutanol. I think that's it.
We thank you so much. Wasn't this fascinating? The time went really quickly. Thank you. Really good.
Indeed, thank you guys. Thank you guys for buying it back. Columbus is a great food town. As a sometimes food critic, I think we know food better than just about anybody else in the country. Looking at Jim and others out there who have started businesses that are doing very well, and we all love pizza, so thank you so much. By the way, speaking of loving pizza, don't forget to look inside the program. There's a little coupon in there. If you don't want it, leave it out front. I'll pick it up on the way out. Yeah. In closing, I hope you enjoyed the forum. I'm sure you did. You can see it again on YouTube, and there's a link at our website. Next week, the Harrison Smith Legacy in Civic Engagement. Be sure to sign up. I want to invite everybody to the lobby for coffee and cookies, no pizza. And I want to thank Bricker and Eckler and the Huntington and Conway Center for Family Businesses, and particularly our speakers, Jim, Jane, and our moderator, Colleen. Thank you very much. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.